Loops. A loop is a programming tool that repeats a set of instructions until a specified condition, called a stopping condition, is reached. As a programmer, you'll find that you rely on loops all the time. You'll hear the generic term iterate when referring to loops. Iterate simply means repeat. When we need to reuse a task in our code, we often bundle that action in a function. Similarly, when we see that a process has to repeat multiple times in a row, we write a loop. Loops allow us to create efficient code that automates processes to make scalable, manageable programs. As illustrated in the diagram, loops iterate or repeat an action until a specific condition is met. When the condition is met, the loop stops and the computer moves on to the next part of the program. Check out the diagram and you can take a look at that diagram there. We'll move on to the next lesson. Repeating tasks manually. Before we write our own loops, let's take a moment to develop an appreciation for loops. The best way to do that is by showing you how cumbersome it would be if a repeated task required you to type out the same code every single time. Create a variable, vacation spots, and assign its value to an array of 3 strings naming places you'd like to visit. Okay, let's say vacation spots. And we can make an array of 3 places. Let's say Bali could be fun. I haven't done anything in South America, so anything in South America would be great. And how about Florida? That's where my parents live. Florida. Those are the vacation spots. And we could run that. Next, console.log each item in vacation spots. Since we don't know loops yet, we have to console.log each element in the array separately. So that would be something like this, console.log vacation spots at 0. And then we're going to need to do this 3 times, so 2 more, and 2 more, 1 and 2, and now we'll run that. That worked. Nice work. Now imagine that the vacation list had 100 places on it. Logging each array element to the console by hand would be a tedious task. In the next exercise, we will learn how to make things more efficient with for loops. Okay, it doesn't say to do anything here. We just press run again. Okay, that's it. We'll go to the next. The for loop. Instead of writing out the same code over and over, loops allow us to tell computers to repeat a given block of code on its own. One way to give computers these instructions is with a for loop. The typical for loop includes an iterator variable that usually appears in all 3 expressions. The iterator variable is initialized, checked against the stopping condition, and assigned a new value on each loop iteration. Iterator variables can have any name, but it's best practice to use a descriptive variable name. A for loop contains 3 expressions separated by a semicolon inside the parentheses. 1. An initialization starts the loop and can also be used to declare the iterator variable. 2. A stopping condition is the condition that the iterator variable is evaluated against. If the condition evaluates to true, the code block will run, and if it evaluates to false, the code will stop. 3. An iteration system is used to update the iterator variable on each loop. The for loop syntax looks like this. For parentheses, let counter equal 0, semicolon. Counter less than 4, semicolon. Counter plus plus, close parentheses, open brackets, console.log counter. In this example, the output would be the following 0, 1, 2, 3. Let's break down the example. The initialization is let counter equal 0, so the loop will start counting at 0. The stopping condition is counter less than 4, meaning the loop will run as long as the iterator variable counter is less than 4. The iteration statement is counter plus plus. This means after each loop, the value of counter will increase by 1. For the first iteration, counter will equal 0. For the second, counter will equal 1, and so on. The code block inside of the curly braces, console.log counter, will execute until the condition evaluates to false. The condition will be false when counter is greater than or equal to 4. The point that the condition becomes false is sometimes called the stop condition. This for loop makes it possible to write 0, 1, 2, and 3 programmatically. Instructions. Now make your own. Create a program that loops from 5 to 10 and logs each number to the console. All right, so let's do one of these for loops. For, let's let I be the iterator or the index and equal to, what did, oh no, it said 5. Okay, and that's a semicolon. So I is less than, we'll say 11, or maybe less than or and equal to 10. Let's check this out. We could always do this again. And then I plus plus, and then we're going to console.log I. Let's try that out. That worked perfectly. All right, we'll move on to the next lesson. Looping in reverse. What if we want the for loop to log 3, 2, 1, and then 0? With simple modifications to the expressions, we can make our loop run backward. To run a backward for loop, we must set the iterator variable to the highest desired value in the initialization expression. Set the stopping condition for when the iterator variable is less than the desired amount. The iterator should decrease in intervals after each iteration. Instructions. Make a for loop that loops backwards, printing 3 to 0 to the console. Use the greater than equal to comparison operator in your stopping condition and the minus minus operator in your iteration statement. It says right up here, the loop below loops from 0 to 3. Edit it to loop backwards from 3 to 0. Okay, so we need to turn this around. So greater than or equal to, the number will be 0, and the counter will start at 3. And the counter is going to need to minus minus, and let's see what happens there. That does it. Let's move on to the next lesson. Looping through arrays. For loops are very handy for iterating over data structures. For example, we can use a for loop to perform the same operation on each element of an array. Arrays hold lists of data like customer names or product information. Imagine we owned a store and wanted to increase the price of every product in our catalog. That could be a lot of repeating code, but by using a for loop to iterate through the array, we could accomplish this task easily. To loop through each element of an array, a for loop should use the array's .length property in its condition. Check out the example below to see how for loops iterate on arrays. Const animals has 1, 2, 3 things within its array. The for loop says for, and the conditions are let I equal 0, I is less than animals.length, I plus plus, console.log animals. This example would give you the following output: grizzly bear, sloth, sea lion. In the loop above, we've named our iterator variable I. This is a variable naming convention you'll see in a lot of loops. When we use I to iterate through arrays, we can think of it as being shorthand for the word index. Notice how our stopping condition checks the I is less than animals.length. Remember that arrays are 0 indexed. The index of the last element of an array is equivalent to the length of that array minus 1. If we try to access an element at index of animals.length, we will have gone too far. With for loops, it's easier for us to work with elements in an array. Instructions. Write a for loop that iterates through our vacation spots array using I as the iterator variable. Inside the block of the for loop, use console.log to log each element in the vacation spots array after the string I would love to visit. For example, the first round of the loop should print I would love to visit Bali to the console. Write your code below. So we're going to do a for loop. Let I, so they wanted I to be the iterator, and I will equal 0. The next will be is I greater than vacation spots dot length I plus plus, and then we're going to console.log and use your backticks for this because they want us to say I would love to visit $, open up your curly braces, and we're going to put in vacation spots, and after vacation spots open up square brackets and put I inside of there. And let's see if that works for us. Let's run that. Nope, we did this wrong. Did you use I? Oh, I'm sorry. I reversed this from the last exercise when it had to be greater than. That was the mistake. So the mistake there, just in case that seemed weird to you. On the last one, we reversed it. We had to go from the top to the bottom, so I did it that way again. This is saying while I is less than vacation spots dot length, I plus plus, add to I. If you did the opposite and we start at 0, it would say while I is greater than vacation spots dot length, I plus plus. And I is never greater than vacation spots dot length because it starts at 0 and this won't run. The iterator won't run. That's what's happening there. Let's move on to the next lesson. Nested loops. When we have a loop running inside another loop, we call that a nested loop. One use for a nested for loop is to compare the elements in two arrays. For each round of the outer for loop, the inner for loop will run completely. Let's look at an example of a nested for loop. Now they're showing a nested for loop. These are for loops within each other. It's a lot to read. If you want to look it over, you're going to see you have a for loop, and within that for loop, you also have a for loop. And for every I in the first for loop, let I equal 0. While I equals 0, J will run in the second for loop from 0 to your array.length before iterating I to 1. And then it will run J again until iterator.length, and then I will go to 2, and so on. Let's think about what's happening in the nested loop in our example. For each element in the outer loop array, my array, the inner loop will run in its entirety comparing the current element from the outer array, my array I, to each element of the inner array, your array J. When it finds a match, it prints a string to the console. Now it's your turn to write a nested loop. Imagine you're a bigwig programmer for a social media platform. You have been tasked with building a prototype for a mutual followers program. You'll need 2 arrays of friends from 2 mock users so that you can extract the names of the followers who exist in both lists. Make a variable called Bob's followers, and set it equal to an array with 4 strings representing the names of Bob's friends. Okay, so we will have a const Bob's followers is equal to an array of Bob's friends. We'll say Bob has a friend named Bob, Bob has a friend named Has, and Bob has a friend named No, and one named Friends. Bob has no friends. Those are all his followers, and let's run that. Make a variable called Tina's followers and set it equal to an array with 3 strings representing the names of Tina's friends. Make exactly 2 of these the same as 2 of the friends in the Bob's followers array. So const Tina's followers equals, and there's an array, Tina, so that doesn't match. I'm going to make these capital too. Tina has many friends. So we should match on has, and we should match on friends. Those are the two, right? It said 2. Oh, no, there's only supposed to be 3 in this array. So we'll just say Tina has friends. There's 3 in the array now, and let's run that. That works. Create a third variable named mutual followers and set it to an empty array. So const mutual followers equals empty array. Let's run that. Create a nested loop that iterates through Bob's followers as the array for the outer loop and Tina's followers as the array for the inner loop. If the current element from the outer loop is the same as the current element from the inner loop, push that element into the mutual followers array. Okay, so here comes our nested for loop. So for, oh, I did for already. Let I equal 0. I is less than, it was Bob's first, right? Bob's followers dot length I plus plus. Inside there we'll have for let j equal 0. J is less than Tina's followers dot length j plus plus. And inside there we are going to compare. We'll do an if statement. If Bob's followers at I triple equals Tina's followers at j, we will mutual followers dot push. And we could take either of them there. Let's take it from Tina. Tina's followers at j. That should work. Let's take a look. Oh, looks like I made a mess. You likely made a syntax error. I wrote Tina followers. That's Tina's followers. Let's see. Perfect. And that's that. Let's move on to the next lesson. The while loop. You're doing great. We're going to teach you about a different type of loop, the while loop. To start, let's convert a for loop into a while loop. So they show a for loop, and we've seen for loops be for. This one lets counter 1 equal 1. When counter 1 is less than 4, counter 1 plus plus. Then we console.log counter 1. Let counter 2 equal 1. While counter 2 is less than 4, console.log counter 2, and then counter 2 plus plus. So it's doing its iteration after it console.logs in the while loop there. Let's leave this in if we can. Okay. Let's break down what's happening with our while loop syntax. The counter 2 variable is declared before the loop. We can access it inside our while loop since it's in the global scope. We start our loop with the keyword while followed by our stopping condition, or test condition. This will be evaluated before each round of the loop. While the condition evaluates to true, the block will continue to run. Once it evaluates to false, the loop will stop. Next, we have our loop's code block, which prints counter 2 to the console and increments counter 2. What would happen if we didn't increment counter 2 inside our block? If we didn't include this, counter 2 would always have its initial value 1. That would mean the testing condition counter 2 less than 4 would always evaluate to true, and our loop would never stop running. This is called an infinite loop, and it's something we always try to avoid. Infinite loops can take up all of your computer's processing power, potentially freezing your computer. So you may be wondering when to use a while loop. The syntax of a for loop is ideal when we know how many times the loop should run, but we don't always know this in advance. Think of eating like a while loop. When you start taking bites, you don't know the exact number you'll need to become full. Rather, you'll eat while you're hungry. In situations when we want a loop to execute an undetermined number of times, while loops are the best choice. Instructions. Below the cards array, declare a variable, current card, with the let keyword, but don't assign the value. Okay, let current card, and run. Great. Create a while loop with a condition that checks if the current card does not have the value spade. Inside the block of your while loop, add the following line of code. Okay, so let's do the while loop first. While current card is not equal to, and that was spade all undercase. We pasted that in. Math.floor, math.random times 4 will give us a random number from 0 to 3. We'll use this number to index the cards array and assign the value of current card to a random element from the array. Let's run that. That worked. Awesome, your loop is running, but you can't tell because it doesn't output anything. Let's add a console.log statement to our while loop. Inside the block, after you assign current card a value, log current card to the console. For fun, you can run your code a few times and see if the output changes. In here, console.log current card, and let's run it. First one we came up with was a spade, so let's do one more. There you go, you had a heart first, then a club, then a spade. Perfect. Next. Do while statements. In some cases, you want a piece of code to run at least once and then loop based on a specific condition after its initial run. This is where the do while statement comes in. A do while statement says to do a task once and then keep doing it until a specified condition is no longer met. The syntax for a do while statement looks like this. Let count string equal empty string. Let I equal 0. Do, and it opens up curly braces, count string equals count string plus I plus plus, close curly braces, while I is less than 5. Console.log count string. In this example, the code block makes changes to the count string variable by appending the string form of the I variable to it. First, the code block after the do keyword is executed once. Then the condition is evaluated. If the condition evaluates to true, the block will execute again. The looping stops when the condition evaluates to false. Note that the while and do while loops are different. Unlike the while loop, do while will run at least once whether or not the condition evaluates to true. Instructions. We'd like a program to simulate part of the cake baking process. Depending on the recipe, a different number of cups of sugar is required. Create a variable cups of sugar needed and assign it to a number value of your choosing. The cups of sugar must be added to the batter one at a time. Declare the variable cups added and assign it 0. Okay, so we need a const that says cups of sugar needed and camel case all of that. And let's say it needs 4 cups of sugar for the cake. Then we need another const called cups added. And we're going to assign that to 0. All right, I'll run that. That worked. We have a sweet tooth, so we want to add at least 1 cup of sugar to the batter, even if the value of cups of sugar needed is 0. Create a do-while loop which increments cups added by 1 while cups added is less than cups of sugar needed. All right, let's look at that context again. All right, so it looks like we have a do, we open up curly braces, and then while comes after that and takes parentheses. Let's figure this out here. Create a do-while loop which increments cups added by 1 while cups added is less than cups of sugar needed. Do. Okay, so in our do, we want cups added plus plus while cups added is less than cups of sugar needed. Let's see if that works for us. We'll run that. Oh, we shouldn't be able to iterate this one. Let's let cups added. That probably will help. That was the mistake. Const can't be reassigned. Let can be reassigned. When I read this here, I thought they wanted both const. I didn't see a let. But yeah, we figured that one out. Let's move on to the next one. The break keyword. Imagine we're looking to adopt a dog. We plan to go to the shelter every day for a year and then give up. But what if we meet our dream dog on day 65? We don't want to keep going to the shelter for the next 300 days just because our original plan was to go for a whole year. In our code, when we want to stop a loop from continuing to execute even though the original stopping condition we wrote for our loop hasn't been met, we can use the keyword break. The break keyword allows programs to break out of the loop from within the loop's block. Let's check out the syntax of the break keyword. We have a for loop, and after the, okay, let's actually read it through. So for, and in there is let I equal 0, I is less than 99, I plus plus. Inside of the body of that for loop, it says if I is greater than 2, break. And then console.log banana. Console.log, aren't you glad I broke out of the loop? The output of the above code is banana, 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 aren't you glad I broke out of the loop? Break statements can be especially helpful when you're looping through large data structures. With breaks, you can add test conditions besides the stopping conditions and exit the loop when they're met. Instructions. Log each element from wrapper array in a for loop with the iterator variable I. Okay, so we'll do for let I equal 0. Got a little period there. I is less than wrapper array dot length, and then I plus plus console.log wrapper array at I. Let's run that. There we are with Little Kim, Jay-Z, Notorious B.I.G., and Tupac. After the for loop, log the string, and if you don't know, now you know, to the console. Note, since there's a single quote character in our string, we can use double quotes around the string to make sure the character prints. Okay, we can do that. So this says after the for loop, we want to log this. So here's our for loop, and then after that, we're going to console.log. Get that double quotes up, and I'm just going to paste this in, run, and that worked. Add a break inside your loop block that breaks out of the loop if the element at the current index in the wrapper array is notorious BIG. Okay, so we will console.log all of that, and then after that we'll make an if statement, and the if will be if wrapper array, let's put our I, sorry about that, brackets I, and then triple equals, and make sure you got this exactly how they have it. And G, and then what we'll do is break. Let's run that. That worked perfectly. Let's go to the next lesson. Review. Great job. In this lesson, we learned how to write cleaner code with loops. You now know loops perform repetitive actions so that we don't have to code that process manually every time. How to write for loops with an iterator variable that increments or decrements. How to use a for loop to iterate through an array. A nested for loop is a loop inside another loop. While loops allow for different types of stopping conditions. Stopping conditions are crucial for avoiding infinite loops. Do-while loops run code at least once, only checking the stopping condition after the first execution. The break keyword allows programs to leave a loop during the execution of its block. And let's see what's up next. Higher order functions.